From Yahoo Finance, this is Ballots and Dollars, a podcast about the politics that affect your pocketbook. I'm Rick Newman.
And I'm Alexis Christoforous. And in this week's Ballots and Dollars podcast, we've heard for years now that Social Security may be insolvent by the year 2033. And Rick, I ask you, is the rumored death of Social Security greatly exaggerated?
Oh, it depends how you look at it. If nothing changes, what's going to happen around 2033 is that the Social Security Trust Fund, which is sort of like the surplus that exists because of the taxes we all pay, is going to run dry. So there won't be any money left in the Social Security Trust Fund by then, which means that Social Security will only be able to cover the benefits that are covered by incoming tax revenue. So that means instead of 100% coverage of all the benefits promised, it'll be maybe 80% or 75%. Now, like I said at the beginning, that's if nothing changes. And I think that before we get to that point, something probably will change. And of course,
the government has jumped in before to save Social Security, at least twice in the not too distant past, right? In the 70s and then again in the 80s.
Yeah, and you can make any change you want to the program. You can reduce the benefits. You can raise the tax. You could do a combination of those things. In fact, there is a report out from the agency that runs Social Security. There are literally several dozen ideas in here for how you could make the program solvent. But we're also hearing about this in the presidential campaign, and most recently with Elizabeth Warren, who actually wants to give away. I should correct myself and not use the word giveaway.
Yeah.
Pay more benefits to Social Security recipients. She says she wants to increase the amount Social Security recipients get by $200 a month, which is actually a lot of money. I mean, that's
$2,400 a year
right.
per recipient?
Per recipient.
Okay,
and
let me
average,
guess where she's getting the money from. Can I guess?
You can guess.
Is it the top 2%? Is it the top 1%?
Well, it's a tax on the wealthy.
Okay.
That's where she's got a tax for everything. And yeah, she wants to raise taxes on the wealthy. So this is a different plan and a different tax hike than some of her other plans. Like she supports Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All plan. She supports free college for more people. Those have their own new taxes that would pay for those things. The way she would do it with Social Security, she would add a new I guess you could call it a surtax or a payroll tax on incomes above $250,000. So everybody who gets a paycheck now pays a payroll tax that goes to fund Social Security, and that is currently split between it's 12.4% that's split 50-50 between employees and employers. So you and I each pay 6.2%, and our employer pays 6.2%, and there's a cap on that. So that's up to an income of about $133,000. And then if you're more than $133,000, you just pay up to $133,000, and then there's no additional tax after that. What she would do is she'd leave this sort of hole where there would be no additional tax until you get to $250,000, and then you would pay an additional 14.8%.
Yeah. She's calling it a Social Security contribution requirement, but let's call it what it is. This is a tax.
It's a payroll tax.
This is an increase in the payroll tax. But again, that 14.8% sounds huge, but again, it would be divided between yourself and your employer.
Yeah, but it's not a small amount of money.
Absolutely
so 14.8, so the employer half of that is 7.4%. And it's weird because you would pay, if let's say you made $300,000, you'd pay the 6.2% up to $133,000 of income. Then you'd pay nothing from $133,000 to $250,000, but once you got to $250,000, you'd pay 7.4% from $250,000 to $300,000. So that's 7.4% of $50,000 is what, like $7,000 if my math is right.
Now you're making us do math, Rick. But whatever it is,
it's not a small amount of money.
Is it fair? Is it fair that the top 1 or 2% should be
Of course it is. They're rich. They're already rich.
Well, Elizabeth Warren seems to think they wouldn't need Social Security when their time comes to tap it.
Yeah. So there are a few problems with her idea, according to people who've studied Social Security. And what could you do otherwise? There's an argument to make that it is more efficient to simply limit benefits or even eliminate benefits for wealthy people. So however that would be defined, it would be some income level or some wealth level. But if you, if you have a retirement plan and you're making, I don't know, if you're pulling down $300,000 of income as a retiree or some number, it could be $500,000. Should you really be getting Social Security? I mean, this is supposed to be a pension plan that helps keep people out of poverty. I mean, that's what the real purpose of Social Security is.
But I mean,
so
if you've paid into it your whole life, and what do you have to show for it in the end? And so, if a lot of people think that's not fair.
I know, but we're going to get to a point with Social Security where something has to give. Mm-hmm. And, the sort of animating concept behind a lot of Elizabeth Warren's ideas is she is attacking income inequality and wealth inequality. And they have both worsened. I mean, we know that they have both worsened. And she's basically supporting what you would call redistributive policies that basically take money from the wealthy and in different ways
you move that money
distribute
around.
it back to lower income and middle income people. And this is just one example of that. So
And is that really a long-term fix, or does that just really kick the can down the road for Social Security?
So her plan, basically, she adds a new benefit, and she tells you how she would pay for the new benefit. She does not address the long-term
viability of the program,
which is that Social Security is not going to run out of money, but it's going to run short of money. And some people who are critiquing her plan say, before you start give anybody any new benefit under Social Security, put that aside. What you need to do first is you need to stabilize this program. Now, I think one of the assumptions is that at the very last minute, when people are about to lose benefits because Social Security is underfunded, Congress will do something to change the law and make sure that the money is there for those benefits to be fully funded.
And how might they do that? In your research, what have you found the experts are saying about how the government might respond sort of in the 11th hour?
Well, there are a lot of ways to do it. I mean, it's really, in a way, it's not that complicated. You have this much money coming in. And by the way, the predicted date when the trust fund runs dry and there's not enough money for Social Security, the people who oversee the program make an estimate of that date every year, and it changes a little bit. It's based on how well the economy is doing. So a stronger economy means more tax revenue coming in and more funding for Social Security. We know we have this demographic problem, which is we're going to have all the baby boomers in Social Security eventually, and we have fewer people underneath them paying the money that goes in. And, by the way, there is a myth about Social Security, which is that, you and I pay in during our working lives, and that money that we paid is sitting there waiting for us as if it's in a saving account.
No.
That is not how it works. You and I are paying money for people who are getting Social Security benefits today.
Right.
And when we retire, it's going to be the future workers.
Meaning the millennials should be paying into our Social Security right now, Rick.
But the numbers just don't work.
Mm-hmm. And why is that?
Well, because of demographics, because we have more old people who are living longer, and we haven't adjusted the program sufficiently. So people who are interested in this, I always like to tell people, look it up for themselves. This sounds really boring, but this is, the glamorous life of a journalist. This is what we do all day. Look up this paper called Summary of Provisions That Would Change the Social Security Program, published by the Social Security Administration in August. And you'll see it's in mind-numbing detail, but you can just flip through it and see there are all kinds of things you can do, and it's a combination of reducing the benefits or altering the benefits, extending the retirement age so people collect, you become eligible later in life. And it has been extended as life expectancies have gone up.
And now, if you want to enjoy the full benefit, you need to wait even longer to the age of 67, right? I mean, as of right now, you can tap into social at 62.
Right. Yep.
But if you want that full benefit, it's at the age of 67, and then it taps out when you hit 70.
Right. And financial advisors say the longer you wait, the better.
Right. If you can, absolutely.
Yeah. And of course, the longer you work, the better. So that's another way to do it. That's not one of these proposals. But so basically there are three things. You can reduce benefits or change the benefit structure. You can delay the point at which benefits begin to accrue. Or you can raise more revenue, which means more taxes. So when it does come time to actually address this problem, it's probably going to be a combination of all of those things. But in the meanwhile, Social Security is a political football, and what Elizabeth Warren is doing is basically saying, I'm going to give retirees more money. And when you mentioned it, $200 a month is $2,400 a year. The average recipient of Social Security gets, I think, almost $17,000 a year, which is obviously not a lot.
Right.
So to go from $17,000 to add another $2,400 on top of that, I mean, that's a meaningful increase in funds, in money to live off of for people who are earning the average there. So that's real money to a lot of people.
Social Security was never meant to be the catch-all, the answer for you when you stop working. I think it's supposed to cover something like 40% of your overall expenses. But for a lot of people in this country, it is their only means of income later in life.
Yeah, and this is the so-called retirement crisis, which is people who just don't save much when they're working. People who thought they would be able to work and earn a good living much longer than they actually can. We know a lot of middle-income jobs have disappeared, especially blue-collar jobs. If you're 50 and you're a blue-collar worker and the factory closes and the work moves to someplace else in the country or to someplace overseas, you don't have a lot of options. I mean, pensions have disappeared. Not many people have pensions. We most of us these days fund our own retirement through a 401k plan. Again, that's been shifting the burden away from the employer to the employee. There are good and bad things about that, but one of the bad things is people are just unprepared for retirement. So, I think Elizabeth Warren is pandering a little bit here. I mean,
is there a little fear-mongering going on too?
Helicopter money.
Or is this a real fear?
I think it addresses a real fear people have. And I think there's actually a pretty good case for directing more of the benefits of government policy at people who are the neediest. I mean, I think she will get a pretty good traction with ideas like this.
Anybody else among the candidates, the presidential candidates, out with their own plans or plans similar to Warren's?
Not like this. No. She is very clever about all of these plans she has because she can say to almost any constituency, oh, I've thought about that problem, and here's how I'm going to help you. And she's helping with real money. She's not helping you with pilot programs and little small ball types of things. Now, of course, the flip side of this is that what she proposes is really expensive. I mean,
right.
And it is unclear to me. I mean, when you look at polls, voters generally do say, sure, I'm fine with raising taxes on the wealthy. But I think in reality, it depends. And if let's say Elizabeth Warren became president and I'm not sure how many of her proposals could pass Congress. And that, of course, would depend on
the makeup of Congress.
That's right, whether it was a Democratic Senate. But just how many tax increases would Congress actually vote into law?
How many tax increases will the wealthy take before they either start moving their businesses elsewhere or start moving out of the country?
Yeah, that's a good question. And as we've discussed on other podcasts, in addition to raising the payroll tax on people who earn $250,000 or more, she also wants to have this wealth tax on people with wealth above $50 million. I think she has discussed a financial transactions tax, which is a Bernie Sanders idea. It's one of the ways Bernie Sanders would pay for a lot of things. So that's what sounds like a small tax on every financial transaction in markets. So that's you buy a stock, you sell a stock. There's a little VIG that goes with that, and it goes to the government, and it's used to fund some program. The financial industry is dead set against anything like that. And then another thing that Elizabeth Warren would do as part of her Social Security program is, in addition to the new payroll tax, there would also be a new tax also of 14.8% on the investment income of everybody who makes $250,000 or more. So
that sounds like a double tax to me.
It does to a lot of other people as well. This is one of the arguments about that's capital gains. So that, like if you make money, it's not clear to me whether that would apply to the sale of a house, which is an important type of capital gain. It may not. But when she says investment income, if you claim, if you sell an ETF that you've held for a long time and you make a $5,000 profit on it, you're going to pay a capital gains tax on that. And there are two different rates depending on whether it's a short-term or a long-term holding. But then she would put another tax of 14.8% on top of that. So the trick with all these kinds of taxes is, majority of people are not wealthy, obviously, and I think that above $250,000, that's for an individual. The threshold would be for the investment income for a couple, I believe it would be $400,000.
That's right.
But a lot of people are fine with taxing the other guy, but then they say, but when is it going to sort of like trickle down to me? And there's this belief that once it's politically okay to raise taxes on this group, well, they're going to bring it down to lower and lower levels until now it's a middle class tax hike. And, once you start talking about taxing me, I don't want to I should not have to pay the extra tax.
It's the equivalent
it should always be somebody else who pays the extra tax.
We also have low inflation. And we know that through the years, Social Security adjustments would at least account for inflation.
Yep.
So they give you a sort of
cost of living
increase every year. But low inflation has actually worked against Social Security recipients in that way, hasn't it?
Well, yes. So the cost of living adjustment, which happens every year, is meant to keep the payments up with inflation. And there are different arguments about whether that index actually works because the index is all inflation. But if you're a senior, you're probably not buying a lot of TVs and cell phones, but you probably are buying. You're probably spending a lot on prescription drugs.
Yep.
And
food, the bare necessities.
And these are prescription drugs is one of those things that has gone up way more than than overall inflation. And then you can also get to the question of if you're older, you want to have your savings in fixed income investments that are safe and pay some interest rates, so you earn a little bit on them. Lower interest rates just lower the rate. The return you're going to get on fixed income investments. Of course, President Trump now wants us to have negative interest rates, which means you would earn nothing on your investments, and you might even have to pay the bank to hold your money. We're not there yet, but it's an interesting policy prescription. So look, it's tough being a senior on a fixed income.
And, millennials…
she's trying to address that.
Millennials seem to be getting it wrong about Social Security by and large.
So?
Well, I think a lot of them think they can they don't think Social Security will be there for them. And they say, well, that's okay. I can save enough to retire even if there is no Social Security. The fact is there probably will be Social Security for millennials. It won't look perhaps the way it does today. But in order to save what you would need, what Social Security would do for you, if you had to save that on your own, your earnings would have to be tremendous for all the years that you are able to work.
I'm thinking this through because I'm 53, and I don't think Social Security is going to be there for me.
But wait a minute.
Not 100%. Not 100% of the benefits we have.
Something would be there. Something would be there.
Sure, something will be there, but…
And you've paid your whole life into it, your whole working life.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So sorry, Rick, that you may not get your full benefit.
Well, do you ever look at your Social Security statement? You get this from the government,
I actually do. I'm a nerd, and I
think
do.
you only get it. I think you have to register, and have an account, which I did at some point.
Yeah, I do get
so
that.
I get my
and
Social
I always
Security
get that number,
statement.
and I sort of cry. But
I look at that and it pisses me off.
I can't believe. Well, you can either going to laugh, cry,
First of all, where did all that money go?
Right.
Now, my mom, she is a Social Security recipient, so I guess I'm sort of supporting my mom in a way.
That's good son.
the way to think about it.
This is what I read regarding the millennials. It says currently the average Social Security benefit is just under $1,500 a month. Is that what you said?
That's about what I said. So it's about $17,000 a year around there.
Okay, so we're almost there. You would need to save $400,000 to generate a similar account. And that's assuming you use the financial planner's 4% rule, which recommends taking no more than 4% of the portfolio in the first year of retirement and adjusting it for inflation after that. That's a heck of a lot of savings
It's
millennials
depressing.
would have to do if Social Security were not there for them.
Well, the lucky thing about millennials is, number one, they're so young they don't need to think about the future.
Oh yeah,
But also they've got a lot of time.
That's not the lesson.
They have a lot
them.
of time. So time is your friend if you're
Yeah.
a millennial. And I've said many times I think millennials are going to do just fine, and they better because they basically have to save America. They have to pay for us.
No pressure.
They have to pay for us for our Social Security.
For our mistakes, maybe.
For our mistakes, and
Yeah.
for the baby boomers. The baby boomers have just taken everything for themselves to some extent. So the millennials are going to have to fix that. But I think this is going to be shared sacrifice. It's just going to have to be.
It's going to have to be.
And this is a problem, partly for good reasons, which is that we're living long. We're living long. So I have not figured out. Like maybe I'll try to see if someone will employ me until I'm 75 or 80, so I can
let's start
defer
a business.
Social Security. I really
you
don't.
and me, Rick. I don't know what we're going to do, but let's do
Geezer
something.
Employment Inc.
I'll buy it. All right. Well, goodness knows we haven't heard the last of Social Security and when it's going to be insolvent, but we'll be listening and tearing apart all the different ideas people have about saving it. We want to thank everyone for listening to this Ballots and Dollars podcast this week. And be sure to follow us on Twitter, as always. I'm at Alexis TV News.
And I'm at Rick J. Newman.
We'll be back with a brand new episode of Ballots and Dollars next week. It's not always easy to say, Rick.
Bottles and dollars.
In the meantime, don't mess me up. In the meantime, go and review this. Please give us 5 stars. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.